Dear God, I am ready for your help in removing from me the defects of character which I now realize are an obstacle to my recovery. Help me to continue being honest with myself and guide me towards spiritual and mental health. Amen. It is with much love and gratitude that the group welcomes Sherri L to come and share with us. Sherri, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sherri, alcoholic. Woo, guys. I'm a little watery here. I love this program. I love that some of you guys I've known newly and some of you guys I've known for years and some of you guys I'm just meeting tonight. But I have so much love in my heart for all of you. And what's such a cool thing is earlier before we started the meeting, Ella came on and said that her sponsor told her that I was speaking, and Ella and I have a relationship as well. And she came, and somebody else texted me today and said, oh, I saw you were speaking at the meeting and I'm going to see you there. And then someone else is on that I used to sponsor. And it's just such a big, beautiful, small world that we have, isn't it? Because I don't really ever, I invited one sponsee because he's at 6 and 7. And other than that, I don't really advertise myself. But it's just really nice to feel so loved. I mean, cause that's bottom line of it, guys, right? I walked around my whole life just wanting to be loved and to love. I didn't know how to love. And so, Sherri, I'm an addict. Sorry about that. And my sobriety date is 2/2/02. That's actually not the last time that I was in my addiction, but the last time I was in my addiction was January, and I don't remember when it was. That's how I used to do that kind of thing back then. We all know how to do that, though, so I don't talk about that. Step 6 and 7 are so important to me, so important to me. I had someone say to me today that step 6 and 7 in previous sponsorship is the steps that she feels like release worked or taken action. So I'm going to get into a couple of things here that I've learned over the years about step 6 and 7. And I think that what I've learned are very big things. I think they have made my life a lot easier. What happens is when my defects of character are removed by God, because they are removed by God, not Sherri. And that's the whole thing about it, is like when they're removed by God, and someone, like, I had a lady scream at me one time in my apartment complex because I kicked a box aside so my dog and I could walk by, and it was an empty box, and she blasted me. And I paused and I was able to walk away and not say a word. And I thought my first thought was, wow, she must be really having a bad day to have to act like that. Oh, but I've been just as crazy. and you know, the boyfriends have called me psycho and all because I pop off on people. But here's the thing. I walked away and I said, they like ourselves are sick too, right? And so I prayed for her. And then I continued to walk, and I was like, you're so impressive, God. You're just so impressive, because I don't know if you know much about the States, but I'm Italian. I'm from New York, and there's a lot of loudness. There's a lot of arguing. There's a lot of put your dukes up and fight back. And, so I was really impressed. It's so impressive to watch God change me, because I'll tell you, left to my own devices, that would not have happened. I would have blasted her right back. And I am just so grateful about that. I want to read the step real quick. I know you did do all the things, but I just wanted to, I want to break it down a little bit. We're entirely ready. Okay. Step 6 is we're entirely ready. Someone said to me last week or whatever, how do I know if I'm entirely ready? Okay. So it does talk about in the book how sometimes we want to hold on to things. I don't believe that to be true for anybody, no matter what you say. It's my opinion. The opinions expressed here do not represent CA as a whole. They are only of the individual, okay? I do not believe that anybody wants to hold on to anything, and here's why. Because no matter how angry we feel or how good we think anger feels in the moment, it doesn't feel good after the fact. And so, they say things like, oh, if you want self-esteem, you have to do esteemable things. Well, here's the thing. It's not esteemable to pop off at somebody, because then I would have, okay, so I've kicked this box so my dog and I can continue our walk just to move it out of the way. She's blasted me. And if I would have blasted her back, so now I have 3 things going on, right? Then I have shame, then I have guilt, then I have fear. Then I have amends to make. Then I have to make a phone call to my sponsor. So now I have 8 problems. Do you see? Misery is of our own making. I add to my problems. I add to things. My defects of character may start out as 1 or 2, but once I pile it on, it's several. And the thing is that that's not the voice of God. That's what I've learned, is the shame and the guilt and the fear and all the things that I do to beat myself up is not the voice of God. I hold on to that stuff. And isn't it so arrogant to think that God can't work through my failures? See, because what I consider a failure, I hold on to. And my friend Ed, I don't know if you guys ever got the pleasure to meet or hear or anything, or you can YouTube him, Ed Mutum. He was like I think he was a little over 7, and he was the manager of the Harlem Globetrotters, and he was long time sober when he passed, and just a great person. And I remember he was sharing in a meeting, and he said, I can sit in a room with 300 people and I can share, and everyone can come up to me and tell me how great I am. And one person comes up and says, I'm a jerk. Which one do I take home? The one that said I was a jerk. I'm so sorry, guys. He calls it the bag of ones. And that's what he does, is put the ones in there, the bag of ones, that he just listens to the one, that nothing can convince him that he's not a jerk, because now that's the one he takes. So when someone says to me, how do I know if I'm ready or not? You're ready. You're ready. Here's why. Because you don't like yourself when you act otherwise. You're ready to let it all go, to let the guilt, the shame, the fear, the anger, the resentment, the controlling nature. You're ready to let all that stuff go. I think we all are. That's just my opinion. And then it says, let's see. Then it says we're entirely ready to have God, period. Does that say to have self remove them? Nope. It says God removes them. Because you see, I used to beat myself to the ground, and I used to wrestle myself to the ground thinking I could change my own behavior. It was a dream. I was 18 years sober, guys, before I found out that this is not behavior management. Teresa F. taught me that when she was my sponsor. This is not behavior management. This is God's job. And I believe that's why the shortest paragraphs in the book about any steps are in 6 and 7, because it's God's job and there's not much for me to do here. So it says, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So I got to get ready to give them to God, to let God remove them. And how do I get ready to let God remove them? If I ask a question and it starts with how, H-O-W, that's exactly how I do it. I do it by being honest, I do it by being open, and I do it by being willing. How do I let God take the defect, or get ready to let God? How? Honesty, open-minded, willing. I have to be honest about my defects of character. I have to be open to a different perception. That's what happens when I get into my defects of character, right? My sponsor likes to say this thing every time I tell her something. It seems like she likes to say this thing, mind your own business. I have to keep my mind open that she's right, that most of the things in the world are not my business. So I have to keep an open mind, and I have to be willing to let it go. I have to be willing to let let God take it, which brings us to step 7. Humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Actually, I'm going to go back for just a second. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I thought someone knocked at the door. I'm so sorry. I'm going to go back to 6. When I talked about self-esteem, they say if you want self-esteem, you have to do esteemable things. I don't have self-esteem today. I don't have self-worth. I don't have self-confidence because I don't want anything to do with self. I have God esteem. I have Godfidence. And I have God worth. And the reason that I have that is because if I want God esteem and if I want Godfidence, I have to do God acts. I have to do acts of God. And those are the spiritual principles. So now in step 7, it says we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Now we've talked about a defective character. And we've talked about shortcomings. In the history, when they were writing the big book, when Bill Wilson was writing the big book, it was divinely inspired. I heard someone say Bill wasn't smart enough to write the book by himself. But back then, when they said defects of character in 6 and shortcomings in 7, he said he just didn't want to use the same word again. Let me tell you my take. A defective character is the things that we find out in step 4 and 5, right? I do step 4, which is just paperwork. Not that serious, folks. My opinion, it's not that serious. It's just paperwork. Step 5 is going over and reporting the paperwork to God and to a sponsor, myself. It's looking at the paperwork, and then my sponsor helps me finish the paperwork in that 4th column. So it says there in that, where was I? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid. And then I add things like judgment or control or jealousy or, those kind of things, fear. And so those are defects of character, right? We know what they are. We're all pretty good at them. And then we add some to beat ourselves up about those defects of character, right? We're just one consistent round circle. You spin me round. Okay. Anyway. And then shortcoming. All right. Right. You ready for this? A shortcoming is actually where I fall short. Where I fall short. So here's the fun news is that when I'm looking at step 6 at all my defects of character, when I go to step 7, I can look at where am I falling short. I was living in New York. There was a guy over in the next apartment complex. We were not, the apartment complexes were not connected to each other. They were away from each other. And there was like a fence that split us, but there was an opening in it because that they had to come through our complex to get out to the main road. This guy's over there. He's obviously deaf. He is putting a phone toward me and kind of making a noise and using hand signals. And I was out walking my dogs, and I didn't live in his apartment complex. So I turned my head because I said, not today, God. I didn't have time. I had to get in. I had to get ready. All the things, I had to go to work. I didn't want to be late. And so then I heard myself. It's pathetic when you hear your own voice. Okay. It's pathetic when I heard myself say, well, Sherri, did you turn your will and your life over to the care of God today or not? You see, love is not convenient. Love is not always convenient. Service is not always convenient, but it's what we do, right? So I go back over there and I help the guy, and it turns out that he was outside waiting for his medical ride to a medical appointment. I spoke to the woman on the phone, and she told me that he thinks he missed his medical appointment. He thinks he missed the ride, and that it was the next day. She said it's tomorrow, and he's all upset. And so I was like, okay, thank you so much. So we hung up, and I had told him about that. And you know how I told him, guys? I know sign language. And the thing is that God chose me out of all the people in that, I didn't even live in his complex. I lived in my own complex. So I thought it justified that I turned my head. This is what I do. But I know sign language, and that guy needed somebody who knew sign language because I was able to tell him. You know how they talk about the ease and comfort in the book? and how they, and for me, what brings ease and comfort now is peace and love, ease and freedom. That's what I'm addicted to today, is peace and love and ease and freedom. And so when I talk about a shortcoming, where I fell short, guys, was I fell short of, so we know, let's talk about the defective character. Defective character is selfish, self-seeking, self-centered, dishonest, because I did have time, and afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to get to work. I'm afraid I'm not going to do what I need to do. I'm afraid, I'm afraid the lights are all going to be red, all this. Okay. Right. So those are my defects of character. Here's my shortcomings. If I would have kept walking in the house, I fell short of extending love. I would have fallen short of extending kindness. I would have fallen short of extending the spirit of helpfulness. I would have fallen short of extending the spirit of service. So you see, to me, I don't have any work to do in step 6 and 7. However, if I am continuing to move forward, I can absolutely focus on what we call the spiritual principles, because they are where I fall short. So there is work for me to do in step 6 and 7. Step 6 and 7 is write them down, look at them, because let me tell you this, I believe you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So if I acknowledge those defects of character, man, I remember one time I was talking to somebody, and my cousin died of COVID, and I was living in his apartment at the time. And so I had to get out, all these things, and I was, having to move or whatever. And my cousins and my aunts and uncles and all, nobody offered to help. Nobody offered to help me move. They all knew I was moving. Nobody said we're coming. Nobody said this is this. Nobody said let's do it on this day. Nobody said anything. And I was so angry. They're my family, and what else am I supposed to do? My sponsor at the time was not available, so I called a sobriety sister, and I just went. And I was so angry, and I was 150 miles an hour, talking, thinking, spouting. And she said, they don't have to. Wow. What? I mean, I get to let somebody off the hook because they don't have to help me. See, my defects of character: entitlement, fear, self-reliance, because I didn't ask God to help me move. I was so concerned with my family was not going to help me move, right? Because there's only self-reliance or God reliance, and belief is not reliance. I can believe in God all day long, but it doesn't mean I rely on God, right? Belief is not reliance. So they don't have to help me. That's what she tells me. And it was like a shock. There was another time I called a sponsor, and I called him and I said, complained about everybody at work. This was when I was working in the office, and every single person, I went through the whole list of everybody in the office and what they did and what they should do and what they didn't do, and how they this and how they that and all this. And he just let me go. Another one of those rants. He just let me go. He didn't stop me. He was an old timer too. I was surprised he didn't stop me. I think he didn't stop me because he had such a juicy solution. You know what he said to me? I just stopped, and he goes, well, it sounds like to me like you get upset when you don't get your way. I had no words. I hung up on him. I could not even speak. I was so shocked from what he said. I could not even speak. But it's true, isn't it? I'm just running around here trying to get my way. They call this thing, like there's this thing they call people pleasing, which is what I thought that I had, but it's not even true. The thing is, I was trying to please people, if you will, because I wanted to feel better. Because if I could make you happy, then I would be happy and you would leave me alone, right? I mean, I'm not even trying to please anybody else. It was really all self. And I mean, that's the thing that I'm ready to let go of, is self. Entirely ready, entirely willing, entirely able to let go of self. And the thing is that if I'm letting God do this work, I am impressed. There was a guy, one time I was walking my dog, and it was a girl. And so she just tinkled. And I turned around to walk back to the house I was living in here in Nashville. And one of the guys down the street was like, "You gonna pick it up?" And I turned around and my Italian New York self came out and I went, "She just peed." Because God changed me. Because God gave me the pause. The pause is a gift. Katie Parker, you guys know Katie? Katie says the pause is a gift. And yes, it is. The pause is a gift because I was able to turn around, put my dukes down, lower my voice, and just tell the guy the truth. And he was very apologetic that he accused me of that. But see, that's the thing. You accuse me of something and boy, it's on, right? Instead of because it wasn't a question, it was an accusation. Sometimes questions are accusations, and I don't like it. Don't accuse me of something. Don't you question my character. Don't you know who I am? And I said, you know what? I went even further because it felt so good to watch God at work. And I said, I understand because there are people who do it, who do leave it. And I've stepped in it, so I understand. You have a great day. And he said, you too. Sorry again. And we just walked we just walked separate ways. Because my sponsor now, who will be 50 years in October, and guys, I'm just going to tell you this, man, she's in it still. She has what I want because she's still in the middle of it. She's still speaking everywhere too. She sponsors people. She has a home group. She does service. She's doing it. She's doing it. And at 50 years sober and, of course, older in age, and she's still doing it. And I remember one time at a meeting, cause step 7 is about humility. And I remember one time at a meeting, she was sharing about how getting on her knees or whatever. And I said, Rena, do you still get on your knees twice a day? And she said, well, sure. No one told me not to. And I started to get on my knees again every day because no one told me not to. I just decided not to. You know why I decided not to? Because it worked. And it worked so well, I stopped doing it. See, that's what happens. That's how we lose people. Meditation, all the things, they work so well, we stop doing it. And every time I have the defect of character of fear, guys, fear is like such a, it talks about it being, the book talks about it being an evil and corroding thread. And, fear for me, the best acronym I know, there's so many, I think I've heard them all, but the best acronym that I love for fear, FEAR, forgetting everything's all right. It's all right. And I just forget. You see, I say I'm a grenade and God is the pin. And as soon as the pin is removed, there is explosive happenings. Either I'm popping off on somebody explosively, or my thoughts are explosive and I'm driving myself insane. And that's the thing. I got to make sure I keep the pin there. Many times people will call me with this, that, or the other, and I say, did you pray about it? I'm going to tell you 95% of the time they say, well, no. Because we forget God, right? I mean, I do. Gosh, there's times where I set the little reminder. I don't know if you guys have an iPhone, but on the iPhone, there's like a reminder thing, and I set it, and it just says, God, it's for me to stop, and make that present, that presence, that connection, that alignment, that spiritual principle of connection and abiding and communion and all those things with God. Even taking a breath, God in, Sherri out. That brings me back. That reminds me. And when that little reminder beeps on my phone, I set it again for another hour or two, depending on how the day's going. Because, I could work for 8 hours and forget God altogether. And so the thing is that what we can do with 6 and 7, because I am going to read just a little bit on the actual in the book, it says, well, I lost my place. It says we have emphasized a willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us the things which we have admitted are objectionable? So for me, things like defects of character like control and manipulate and force and fear and self-reliance and doubt and indecision. I was just talking to somebody today about a decision, actually, because she's kind of going back and forth about a decision and not really ready to make one, but kind of is thinking about it. And, one of the things I always do when I'm faced with indecision is I ask God to decide for me. Because I don't even want to decide anymore. I just know that it's just going to happen, but yet I'll drive myself absolutely crazy trying to make a decision or what's the right decision or afraid to make the wrong decision. So I ask God to decide for me because here's what happens, and this is what I said to her today. I said, you're confused about your decision and your mind is, in that confusion. But here's what I know for sure. God is not confused. God is not confused. And if I'm relying on God, because there's only God reliance or self-reliance. See, it's funny because there's a line in the book and says that God is everything or nothing, but I don't really, that's not my statement. A lot of people state that. But you know what? There's another sentence. Here's what it says. God either is or isn't, period. So God is either in this situation or isn't. God is either in this conversation or isn't. God is either in this group conscience or isn't. God is either in this resentment or isn't. God is either in it with me at this job or isn't. God is either in this fear with me or isn't. The 12 and 12 says emotional stability is dependence on God. That's what I believe. That's what I believe these defects of character are. When I'm in them, when I'm participating in defects of character, I'm not emotionally stable. I'm not emotionally stable because I'm in self. Belief is not reliance. I can believe in God. I can even pray because I don't have to believe to pray. Belief is not reliance. I have to rely. And then the thing is with this reliance thing, it gets so quiet. It gets so quiet. So we're talking about these defects of character, control. I said control, manipulate, force, afraid, selfish, self-seeking, self-reliance, doubt, indecision. All these things are defects of character. So the thing is where I fall short. If I'm being controlling in my own life or being controlling in someone else's life for them, which they usually don't ever ask for. Where I'm falling short is at surrender because they're God's, not mine. See, I'm not powerless over my addiction. I'm powerless over the ism, internal spiritual malady. Internal spiritual malady where there's a spiritual solution. So if I'm being controlling, the action I can take is surrender because you see, we forget that surrender is an action. Surrender is an action. That's practicing the principles. Waiting is an action. That's practicing the principles. Reliance is an action. That's practicing the principles. Praying is an action. That's practicing the principles. And so see what happens when I'm in force, it means, or when I'm in decision, it means I'm not waiting. I'm falling short of waiting. And when I try to manipulate or control, I'm falling short of surrender. And I'm falling short of allowing. And the spiritual principle that I love more than anything is live and let live, which equates to mind your own business. See, mind your own business is a spiritual principle. And I just want to tell you that mind your own business is a spiritual principle because when I mind my own business, the entire world surrounding me is elated. Do you know how many people I make happy by minding my own business? Do you know that shut up is a spiritual principle? When I shut up, the people around me are elated. They didn't ask for my opinion anyway. They didn't. And you know, most things are none of my business. I remember something had happened at work. Something didn't happen. I dropped an F-bomb on a meeting on like, it's like a Zoom, but it's Teams. I dropped an F-bomb when I was telling, cause our meetings were just, some of them were just for chit chats, just because they wanted to do like team building stuff since we weren't in office together. So I dropped the F-bomb and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. My sponsor wasn't available, so I called my sobriety sister, different one. They're all mean. But anyway, so I'm like, oh my God, I dropped the F-bomb and I think this is going to be the thing they're going to fire me over. See, we go right over to the worst case scenario, right? And she said, oh my God. And she said it that loud too. And I was thinking, she's on my side. Oh my God, she's going to say they probably are going to fire you. And she goes, oh my God, you cannot make a mistake. The ease and freedom, right? And I know it's not 6 or 7, but I do love that step 4 says we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Because here's the thing, guys, a mistake can be corrected. A mistake can be corrected. And here's another thing that I find really important to remember is when I'm in all those things like blame and shame and guilt and fear and all those things, to remind myself that that's not the voice of God, but also to remind myself that that's not even the truth. If I stick to the facts, see what happens is I get too caught up in my emotions and my thoughts. You know, you ever say my back's killing me? Is it? Is it? Is it killing you? You know, you're driving me crazy. Am I? Because that's a short trip. You know, I mean, we just say things and we take them and we run and, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, and humility is a spiritual principle to practice. That's what I loved when my sponsor says she still gets on her knees because no one told her not to. Because that's a practice of humility. I ask people to get on their knees. And I say, God doesn't need you to get on your knees, but you need you to get on your knees because you have been trying to think that you're a higher power and you're not. Or you need to get on your knees and fire that person as your higher power, or your spouse or your partner or your employer or whoever. You know, you need to get on your knees and fire them. They're not your higher power. And just say, all right, God, I'm back. And here's the thing about this whole 6 and 7 kind of thing. It's like, if I'm putting someone else as my higher power, or if I'm thinking I'm my higher power and I'm completely like a tornado in self-will, the thing is that I don't have to stay there. I don't have to stay there. I can get on my knees and I can fire myself and I can ask God to come into my life. And, you know, one of my sponsees said to me one time, I don't remember exactly what was happening with him, but he said he couldn't call or text or anything to make contact. But he said, so I just prayed and he said, and I asked God to be with me. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, just one thing. Don't ask God to be with you. Affirm that God is with you. Because see, God is a fact and not a feeling. I do feel God sometimes. I feel God sometimes so strongly, so spiritually, so immensely that I cry, that I just weep out of gratitude and just the love that I feel. Because see, the reason I had to get away from all the people pleasing things, as you will, or letting you guys be my higher power based in what you think on me, is that I started to say a mantra. God loves me. God accepts me. God approves me. God adores me. And I added my own, God thinks I'm fantastic. And I believe that to be true today of my higher power. That's why I have confidence, because I repeated that and I repeated that and I repeated that. And I'll tell you what, the mantra thing, repeating that, A belief is just a thought I keep thinking, right? I believe things because I've thought them all my life, or I believe things because someone's told me that was true and I believed it all my life. And then I got here and you were like, no, those are old ideas. We have new ideas here. And step 7 talks about having a new relationship with your creator. Isn't it interesting? It says a new relationship. It doesn't say a better version of the old. It's not a better version of the old. It's a new, because I have an ever-changing relationship with a never-changing God. It's not about God. It's about how big can my perception of God be? How much can I rely on God? I remember the first time I went to practice something, it was about a decision. And my sponsor at the time, I said, I don't know what to do, this, and this. And he said, today is like, whatever it is, June 4th. Why don't you give it to God and tell him you're not going to think or talk about it again until June 9th? And when it comes back up, you just say, oh yeah, God, I gave that to you. Talk to you again on the 9th. And that was really practicing letting God take the defective character, because all I was trying to do was control the outcome. I'm always trying to control an outcome. I always temper tantrum when I don't get my way. In the 4th step, that 3rd column where it talks about it affects so in there is ambition. So an ambition is like a goal. My goal is I got to run to the grocery store. I got to pick something up. And here's the goal. I want to run to the grocery store with no traffic. Don't ever get in my way. I want to get what I need to get. I don't want anybody to be in front of me with their cart. I don't want anybody to be there standing at the shelf. I want to go get what I want to get, and I want to come back home with no traffic. And boy, as soon as somebody cuts in front of me in line or in traffic or is standing, like trying to make a decision based on some granola, and I see my granola and I just want to grab my granola and run and go, it's like, oh man, you're messing with my ambitions. But you see, that's just more self. That's just more defect. But it's okay, because we all have defects of character. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a defect of character. And when people call me with things like, oh, I'm afraid of blah, 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 I'm like, oh, congratulations, you're normal. Because we get to a place where we're normal, don't we? We really do. We just have a life. We're just nice. We're just happy. I remember one time I was doing some service. It was at a convention, and a woman who was standing next to me, we were setting books up or something, and she said, oh, I love the humming. It's a sign of contentment. I didn't even know I was humming. Because see, today, here's the thing, guys. My mantra today is peace is still. Because peace is something that I fall short of. And so I have to practice the principle of peace. And when I practice the principle of peace, and I say my mantra for that, peace is still, I remember that God is still, that surrender is still, that waiting is still, that allowing is still. And these are all spiritual principles. These are all things that I fall short of, so I practice them. And the reason I practice them is because if I just keep thinking them, then I'll start to believe them. And when a thought becomes a belief, it becomes a practice, which becomes a lifestyle. You know how that works. I want to say something that I said in the beginning, because I think that people miss the mark on self-hatred and self-unforgiveness and all those things. I just want to say again, please don't be so arrogant to think that God can't work through your failures. There's not one thing about me today that I don't love. There's not one thing about me today that I don't think God loves. I'm not perfect. But I perfectly believe that the things that I say to myself are not the voice of God. And now I'm at the place where I just talk back to myself, because, I've been practicing some things for like 23 years. And like, I'll say something like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you did that. And I'll say, that's not the voice of God, Sherri. And then I'll say, and you're not an idiot. You're bright. You're brilliant. You're so smart. Because I just tell myself lies all the time, right? A defective character, dishonesty. I'm such a freaking liar. I had a friend who invited me. They started this meeting and they called it the liar's table because it was at this table at one of our houses here, one of the AA houses here. And I said, I'm not coming to that meeting because I'm not a liar anymore. And shortly after that, because I brought it to my attention about being a liar or not, so I said, I was getting dressed one day and I wasn't really watching, but in my side vision, in my peripheral vision, I noticed a huge bruise on my leg. I mean, the bruise was the size of my entire leg. It was huge. I looked at it and went, oh my God, that hurts so bad. I didn't even know it was there. Lies, 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 right? Oh, lies. You know, and the thing is that what I realize is that the truth, honest to God, is what brings me ease and freedom. Because if I stick to the facts, I'm having money issues. I'm stressing out because of a job and where I live and blah, all this crap. So some of you guys know Reggie W. So he was an interim sponsor for a bit. So I call him and I'm like, oh my God, Reggie, I'm fully loaded with fear about this money and this job. He's like, Sherri, oh my God, are you okay? And I go, well, yeah. And he goes, do you not have food? And I go, well, yeah. He goes, are you living in your car? And I go, well, no. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I was like, damn. See, because I was lying to myself. Fear is just a liar. Fear is me lying. When I'm afraid, I'm lying. I'm saying that something might be my job. That's not my job. I have to practice the spiritual principle of minding my own business. Oh, here was the thing when I called my sponsor about the job. So as I called the sobriety sister and she said what she said. And then I called my sponsor one time. I said, oh my God, I did this at work, blah, blah, something else. I don't even know what. That's how important it's not, right? When we're in the moment, we think it's so important. And when we tell the stories, we can't even remember what the whole context was. But anyway, I called and I told her, I'm like, oh my God, I think they're going to fire me. She said, Sherri, if they fire you, that's none of your business. You know, these shocking things. But it's not, is it? It's God's business. I had another friend one time I was calling, complaining about something. And I was like, blah, 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 blah. Just complain. He said, well, Sherri, you know, God's brought you this far. I don't really think he's going to drop you now. I said, I'm not in recovery right now. You know, because sometimes I just do want to, you know, but I don't know, guys. I mean, 6 and 7 for me is practicing where I fall short because the rest is God's job. You know, that's what I was going to read. I closed the book again, so I keep losing my page, but that's what I was going to say. It says God. It says God removes the defects of character. And it says, I pray that you, and they're talking to God. So my creator, right? That's code for God or whatever you call your higher power. I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. It also says good. So you know what? When I need to say the 7th step prayer, I tell God to take all my brilliance and all my talents and all my gifts and skills and abilities that I've been gifted with. I tell him to take those too and mix it all up, God, and make it into something great. And I know that's me telling God what to do, but still, I want to give the good and the bad to him because you know what? I've spent too much of my life looking at just the bad. A line in Pretty Woman. He said, I think you have a lot of potential. And she said, the bad stuff is easier to believe. And I think that's what happens here. I think that we just believe the bad stuff because sometimes we get addicted to that. Sometimes we get addicted to the chaos. I had someone call me, say, brand new, somebody referred her to me and want to talk about sponsorship and I'm this and I'm living in 10, 11 and 12 and I'm doing this and I'm spending 20 minutes in the morning and I'm doing this at night and I'm praying this and I'm meditating that and I'm doing this and I'm doing la 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 la. And I go, oh, well, it sounds like you have it all together. And she just paused and we both just busted out laughing. Because if I lived in steps 10, 11, and 12, guys, I would forget about 1, 2, 3 that says I have no power. That life is unmanageable if I'm trying to manage it. So I have to fire myself as manager. And then in step 2, that it's God that restores me to sanity.
because belief is not reliance. I have to rely on God. And that step 3 is I'll just go along and see what happens, God. I just give my day to God. I'll go along and see what happens. I don't even ask for the defects of character to be removed anymore. Sometimes I do need a step 7 because self-will still runs riot. But I don't get real specific, guys. And step 4 is making room for this God. It's not just looking at the crap, it's paperwork. And step 5 is beautifully sharing it without the face that you're telling it to moving. Because when the face doesn't move, it means they're not judging me. And beautiful step 6 is getting ready to get ready to get rid of all this stuff that I've been looking at, all the ugly stuff. Step 7 is to give it to God, to ask God to remove it humbly. And then it's to go on and to practice the opposite of the defect of character. It's to practice the shortcomings. Where I fall short is what I get to practice. And that's where the action is in step 6 and 7. And that's the work in step 6 and 7. I am absolutely delighted to be here today. Purdy, I love you so much. It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your share. You were heard. Appreciate you, sister, and grateful that you're here. Let's all take a moment. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. I'd like to now hand back to Sherri to take us out with a prayer or a reading of your choice.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much to the service team. I know these meetings are not always easy to put together, even though there are those of us who just show up and talk. And I thank you all so much. Thank you, Purdy, again, for allowing me to do this. I just want to tell you guys real quick, when Purdy asked me, it was on a Tuesday and he said he was starting it. It was going to be on Wednesday. And so I go, okay, tomorrow? And he was like, no, I'm just doing the diaries. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you guys for your time and attention. I'm going to read the St. Francis prayer on page 99 and 12 and 12 if you have it. But I'm not going to read the defects of character, guys, because what our work is to practice the principles. And so I'm just going to read it as the principles. If you want to preditate it with me, pray / meditate. I'm just going to read that. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace. May I bring love. May I bring the spirit of forgiveness. May I bring harmony. May I bring truth. May I bring faith. May I bring hope. May I bring light. May I bring joy. May I love, comfort, and understand. Amen. Thank you, everybody.